futurist, gentlemen. The futurist is here. He sees all. He knows what's best for you, whether you like it or not.
Well, the same you are not, but there's so much you've got. Home sweet home, yeah.
Because women are the primary readers of romance novels, they are often not considered serious literature. In an article for The Independent, journalist Della Faye argues that her anti-romance book snobbery was rooted in internalized misogyny. She writes, "Here's an uncomfortable admission. My views on romance novels were rooted in classism and internalized misogyny. I thought romance novels were for ditzy housewives. I would scoff and roll my eyes at the mere sight of their covers. With the kinds of books I was buying, I was trying to fulfill whatever idea I wanted to project of myself. By reading cool books, maybe I could be cool too. Perhaps by reading books I thought were highbrow, I would appear to be highbrow too." Faye also states that she was surprised by the serious themes discussed in the romance novels that she read, including racism, homophobia, sexism, sexual harassment, female solidarity, and empowerment. I found this argument interesting because the conventions of the romance novel have long been controversial. Blatant misogyny and sexism are staples of the genre. Despite the genre tropes, Faye says, quote, "Reading romance novels has given me hope. Enjoying them with all of their endearingly predictable tropes is like a safe haven in a world that feels cold and harsh. There is a warmth that comes from being able to guess what the next chapter entails. This is the perfect kind of much-needed escapism, which feels so important right now, when we have no idea what our lives might look like in the morning." Faye, like many women, has been swept up in the resurgence of romance novels on BookTok, the book-loving community on TikTok. BookTok is known for promoting quote-unquote spicy books. It is certainly true that the need for escapism is at an all-time high, as women's rights are eroded and the future of the country remains uncertain. However, romance novels for me serve as a reminder of the dangers women face in the world, not a reprieve. I have recently read 2 romance novels, An Offer from a Gentleman by Julia Quinn and Layla by Colleen Hoover. Julia Quinn and Colleen Hoover are 2 of the most popular romance novelists in the world right now, and have sold millions of copies of their books. Their works have been so culturally impactful that they have been reimagined as a television show and a film, respectively, with more seasons and films on the horizon for both women. The ubiquity of these authors gives me great pause, given what I read. Both books deeply disturbed me, which I know is not the feeling I was supposed to walk away with. The plots of both books hinge on what I'm calling the homebound trope. This trope occurs when, through physical force or other means, the male main character forces a woman who he is or has been romantically involved with to go to or remain in a home he has ownership over for an extended period of time. I'm going to focus on this trope as a literary phenomenon, but it appears frequently in media for adults and children. One very adult example is the popular Netflix film 365 Days, in which a man in the Italian mafia kidnaps a Polish woman and imprisons her in his home, forcing her to fall in love with him in the next 365 days. The most obvious example for children is Beauty and the Beast, in which Belle is the Beast's prisoner and is forced to fall in love with him. Shrek is an example of a children's film that plays with the trope, ultimately critiquing it. The homebound trope also hugely overlaps with the abduction as romance trope often employed in movies. Because I will be focusing on 2 novels, if you want a great analysis on the abduction as romance trope in films, please watch Pop Culture Detective's video on the subject. I will link his video in the description along with anything else that I reference in this video. The rest of this video will contain detailed discussions of the plots of An Offer from a Gentleman and Layla. I have edited book quotes for brevity and clarity. Many women would likely cite Disney princesses as an early example, or perhaps the first example, of who we should be. Kind, humble, gracious, forgiving, spirited, but not too spirited, and of course, effortlessly beautiful. A woman who experiences severe trauma, but isn't too traumatized to be a good wife. Our heroine, Sophie Beckett, fits the bill perfectly. Julia Quinn, in many ways, fashions the novel's heroine in the style of a Disney princess, specifically Cinderella. Sophie is the illegitimate daughter of an earl who never claimed her as his own, passing her off as the orphan daughter of an old friend after she's dropped off on his doorstep as a child. The earl allows Sophie to live in his home, and he sees her a few times a year when he's in town. How generous of him. She's raised by the earl's staff, and the servants become her family. This is an agreeable arrangement for everybody, but this peace is disrupted when the earl gets married. The earl's new wife, Araminta, in classic fairy tale fashion, is an unpleasant addition to the household. The evil stepmother, Araminta, of course, brings two new stepsisters with her. One of the sisters, Rosamond, has her mother's cruel streak, while the other, Posy, is just as much of a target as Sophie. Araminta clearly favors Rosamond over Posy. For Bridgerton fans, it's very reminiscent of how another mother in the Bridgerton universe, Portia Featherington, treats her daughter, Penelope. Sophie's father, the Earl, dies when she is 14 years old. Araminta, knowing Sophie is the Earl's bastard daughter, overworks and abuses her for years to come. Araminta resents the fact that she was never able to produce an heir of her own. When Sophie is 20 years old, instead of meeting her prince at a royal ball thrown with the purpose of finding the prince a new wife, Sophie meets her love interest, Benedict Bridgerton, who is certainly no prince, at a masquerade ball at the Bridgerton house. Benedict is decidedly not looking for a wife, but his mother Violet is pushing him to marry. Araminta and her stepsisters, Rosamond and Posy, plan to attend the masquerade ball without Sophie. The household staff conspire to get Sophie ready for the ball, serving collectively as her fairy godmother. No magic necessary. The servants dress her up in an old silver dress and finish her outfit off by swiping a pair of Araminta's shoes. Sophie goes to the ball, and the inevitable happens. Benedict sees her, whisks her away, they share a kiss, and ultimately fall in love in mere minutes. However, Sophie does not reveal her name to Benedict, though she figures out his identity herself. She feels certain that they will never see each other again, and can never be together. She is a maid, and the bastard daughter of an earl, while he is a very respectable and wealthy man from a respectable family. Benedict, though he doesn't know who she is, assumes she's a part of the upper class like him, because of how well-spoken and educated she is. Sophie was wearing a mask, and she left few clues as to who she was, with the exception of a glove with her family crest on it that she accidentally leaves behind. This book's version of the glass slipper in Cinderella. Sophie is known only as the Lady in Silver. The glove leads Benedict to the right home, but Araminta locks Sophie in her closet when he arrives. Realizing that Sophie was the Lady in Silver, Araminta throws her out onto the street to fend for herself. Before leaving, Sophie steals two of Araminta's shoe clips to pawn. Years pass before Benedict and Sophie encounter each other again. While at a party, Benedict runs into Sophie, who is a maid at the home. Sophie is attempting to leave because a member of the family who owns the home, Philip, continues to make unwanted advances toward her despite her protests. Benedict stops Philip and his friends from assaulting Sophie. Benedict fails to recognize Sophie as the Lady in Silver, and Sophie decides to stay quiet about it. Benedict takes Sophie to his cottage, but quickly falls ill after they get caught in a rainstorm. Sophie nurses Benedict back to health, and they grow closer. After Benedict makes a full recovery, he realizes he's falling in love with Sophie. They kiss. Sophie is in need of a job. She obviously is no longer working for the would-be rapist's family. Benedict declares to Sophie, "You're not meant to be a housemaid, Sophie. It's clear to me, and it ought to be clear to you." The condescension in his tone truly jumps off the page. He knows what's best for Sophie, and she would be foolish not to agree. After rattling off a list of professions he believes are more suitable to her level of education, it becomes clear that Benedict isn't as smart as he thinks he is. Sophie has of course thought all of these ideas through already and ruled them out. But there's one option that Benedict thinks is perfect. However, it's the last thing Sophie would ever want. "You're very kind to try to help me," she said, "but I've already explored all those avenues. Besides, I am not your responsibility." "You could be." She looked at him in surprise. In that moment, Benedict knew he had to have her. There was a connection between them, a strange, inexplicable bond that he felt only one other time in his life, with the mystery lady from the masquerade. And while she was gone, vanished into thin air, Sophie was very real. He was tired of mirages. He wanted someone he could see, someone he could touch, and she needed him. She might not realize it yet, but she needed him. Benedict pulls Sophie into a non-consensual kiss, silencing her with his mouth when she tries to speak, and then he asks her to be his mistress. Sophie balks at the idea of being his mistress. She's obviously horrified. She does not want to suffer the same fate as her mother, nor does she want to subject a child to her fate, the pain of being a bastard. She dreams of marriage and of creating a stable family. Benedict doesn't know her history, but he doesn't have to. Sophie says no. That should be the end of the conversation. Instead, it isn't. Benedict responds with impatience and anger, lashing out after she rejects him. Though he admits they can never be married, he doesn't understand why Sophie would dare turn down his offer. "I can't do this, Benedict," she said, barely able to look at him. "I don't see why not," he muttered. "I can't be your mistress." He rose to his feet. "And why is that?" Something about him pricked at her. Maybe it was the arrogance of his tone. Maybe it was the insolence in his posture. "Because I don't want to," she snapped. "And what are you going to do instead?" he hissed. "Work as a housemaid?" "If I have to." "You'd rather wait on people, polish their silver, scrub out their damn chamber pots, than come and live with me?" She said only one word, but it was low and true. "Yes." His eyes flashed furiously. "I don't believe you. No one would make that choice." "I did." "You're a fool." She said nothing. She'd hurt him, she realized. She'd hurt him and insulted his pride, and he was lashing out like a wounded bear. "You bloody fool," he swore. "Do you have any idea how dangerous it is in the world for a woman alone?" "Yes," she managed. "Actually, I do." If you heard her, he gave no indication, just went on about men who take advantage, and helpless women, and fates worse than death. He then victim blames her for Philip's attempted assault. Benedict swore under his breath. "That's it," he announced. "You're coming back to London with me." That seemed to wake her up. "I just said I'm not." "You don't have to be my mistress," he bit off, "but I'm not leaving you to fend for yourself." "I was fending for myself quite adequately before I met you." "Adequately?" he sputtered. "At the Cavenders? You call that adequate? You're not being fair. And you're not being intelligent." Benedict thought that his argument was most reasonable, if a little overbearing. But obviously Sophie did not agree. Because much to his surprise, he found himself lying face up on the ground, having been felled by a remarkably quick right hook. Sophie is in a vulnerable position, and Benedict takes advantage of her. Telling her that it's too dangerous for a woman to be alone in the world, he stops her from leaving the cottage on her own. Despite having no place to go, Sophie knows she wants to leave. Benedict stalks her through his cottage, quote, growling, unquote, that she's, quote, not going anywhere, unquote. Sophie says, literally, "Please leave me alone." Benedict replies, "I'm afraid I can't." He later says, "I can't help it. I find myself completely unwilling to let you go." Then says, "I didn't save you from Cavender just to let you squander your life away." Sophie replies, "That isn't your choice to make." She had a point there, but he wasn't inclined to give it to her. Perhaps he allowed, but I'm going to make it anyway. "You're coming with me to London. We will discuss it no further." "You're trying to punish me," she said. Because I refused you. No, he said slowly, considering her words even as he answered. No, I'm not. I'd like to punish you, and in my current state of mind, I'd even go as far as to say you deserve to be punished, but that's not why I'm doing it. Then why are you? It's for your own good. That's the most condescending, patronizing. I'm sure you're right, he allowed, but nonetheless, in this particular case, at this particular moment, I know what's best for you, and you clearly don't. So don't hit me again, he warned. How, she said, in a very low voice, do you intend to stop me from going my way? Does it really matter? He asked, shrugging nonchalantly. I'm sure I'll think of something. Her mouth fell open. Are you saying you'd tie me up and... I didn't say anything of the sort, he cut in with a wicked grin, but the idea certainly has its charms. You leave me no choice then, he stated grimly. Her eyes met his. Either you come with me to London and... He held up a silencing hand when she tried to protest. And I will find you a position in my mother's household, he added pointedly. Or, she asked, her voice sullen, or I will have to inform the magistrate that you have stolen from me. Her mouth abruptly tasted like acid. You wouldn't, she whispered. I certainly don't want to. But you would. He nodded. I would. They'd hang me, she said, or send me to Australia. Not if I requested otherwise. And what would you request? His brown eyes looked strangely flat, and she realized that he wasn't enjoying the conversation any more than she was. I would request, he said, that you be released into my custody. That would be very convenient for you. His fingers, which had been touching her chin all the while, slid down to her shoulder. I'm only trying to save you from yourself. Sophie walked to a nearby window and looked out, surprised that he hadn't tried to stop her. You're making me hate you, you know, she said. I can live with that. Benedict takes every opportunity he can to reassert his power over her, even though she's already his captive. Once they arrive at the Bridgerton house against Sophie's will, he picks a fight with her about what door to enter through. Benedict motioned for her to follow him, and she did, until they reached the front steps. Sophie shook her head. I'll use the side entrance. His lips thinned. You'll use the front entrance. I'll use the side entrance, she said firmly. No woman of breeding will hire a maid who enters through the front. You're with me, he ground out. You'll use the front entrance. A bubble of mirth escaped her lips. Benedict, just yesterday you wanted me to become your mistress. Would you dare bring your mistress to meet your mother through the front door? She confounded him with that. Sophie grinned as she watched his face twist with frustration. She felt better than she had in 2 days. Would you, she continued, mostly just to torture him further, bring your mistress to meet her at all? You're not my mistress, he bit off. Indeed. His chin jutted out, and his eyes bored into hers with barely leashed fury. You're a bloody little housemaid, he said, his voice low, because you've insisted upon being a housemaid. And as a housemaid, you are, if somewhat low on the social scale, still utterly respectable. Certainly respectable enough for my mother. Sophie's smile faltered. She might have pushed him too far. Good, Benedict grunted, once it was clear that she was not going to argue the point any further. Come with me. He frequently shows up at his mother's home where he doesn't live. He stalks her, and he prevents her from leaving rooms, just as he did at his cottage. Much to Sophie's extreme lack of surprise, Benedict showed up at his mother's home the following morning for breakfast. Sophie should have been able to avoid him completely, except that he was loitering in the hall as she tried to make her way down to the kitchen, where she planned to take her morning meal with the rest of the servants. As she stepped to her left, he stepped to his right, effectively blocking her path. Benedict was far too debonair to step back to his left, but he somehow managed to turn and lean against a table in just the right way to once again block her movement. He stepped gallantly aside. Until next time, he murmured, and Sophie had the sinking feeling that next time would come quickly indeed. 30 minutes later, Sophie edged slowly out of the kitchen, half expecting Benedict to jump out at her from around a corner. Well, maybe not half expecting. Judging from the way she couldn't quite breathe, she was probably whole expecting. Sophie selected a recently published novel and settled herself into a wrought iron chair on the small patio. She'd only read a chapter before she heard footsteps approaching from the house. Somehow she managed not to look up until a shadow fell across her. Predictably, it was Benedict. Do you live here? Sophie asked dryly. No, he said, plopping down into the chair next to her, although my mother is constantly telling me to make myself right at home. Benedict eventually discovers that Sophie is the lady in silver and angrily confronts her about it, delighting in her discomfort, delighting in the anxiety he creates in her. She profusely apologizes, of course. For what, I'm not sure. She did not owe him any information about herself. Ultimately, Sophie and Benedict get married, have children, and live happily ever after. I felt sick to my stomach when I closed the book. The male main character, Leeds, yes, that's his actual name, is playing in a wedding band at a bed and breakfast in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, when he meets his love interest, Layla. Layla, as it turns out, is the bride's sister. He is immediately taken by her when he first spots her from on stage. She's the only person dancing, and she's a terrible dancer, of course. Layla is a manic pixie dream girl, so she has to be perfectly imperfect and quirky cute. Leeds and Layla swim in the pool together, pop pills, and share a kiss that night. These pills, it turns out, are just aspirin, but Leeds doesn't know that. He spends time with Layla in the pool, falling in love with her, thinking it's fueled by drugs. When he finds out that he's sober, he decides Layla is his soulmate. Apparently, Layla just gives him a natural high. I was truly struggling not to roll my eyes reading this part. To Leeds, Layla is the perfect woman because she's carefree and confident, the opposite of his crazy ex-girlfriend, Sable. He thinks at one point about Sable, quote, her insecurity was the loudest thing about her, unquote. Ouch. Sable was initially a groupie that Leeds had a one-night stand with. In his own words, he then kept her around out of convenience. Quote, I thought it would end up being a one-night stand at first, but she kept coming around. I didn't do anything about it because I didn't mind the company, unquote. Sable quickly became obsessive about their relationship. He discovers that she started a fan club for him a year before they met, and he decides to distance himself, of course. He broke up with and blocked Sable, and she stalked him on social media in response. Despite cutting Sable off months earlier, Leeds has lingering concerns about her, concerns he decides not to share with Layla, even as their relationship becomes serious. Quote, I don't want to say anything about Sable that might worry Layla, but the girl is definitely someone worth worrying about. He also decides to keep his wealth a secret. Leeds is very wealthy after inheriting his dead father's money. So wealthy that he doesn't even have to be in this band that he hates. Quote, my finances haven't come up in conversation between me and Layla yet. She assumes I'm a starving artist, yet somehow still loves me, as if I could give her the world. There's no better feeling than being loved for who you are, rather than for what you're worth, unquote. Just months after meeting in Kansas, Layla is living with Leeds in Tennessee. He decides to post a picture of himself and Layla to his social media. It immediately attracts the attention of Sable, who reaches out to Layla, who then blocks Sable. Leeds quickly deletes the picture, but still feels uneasy. One day there's a knock on the door. He feels wary, but before he can see who is there, Layla opens the door and is shot in the head by a jealous Sable. Sable subsequently shoots Leeds in the shoulder. We find out much later in the book that Leeds kills Sable after she shoots him. So Layla and Leeds have both been through a lot, to put it mildly. Layla eventually recovers after extensive treatment, but suffers after effects that are both physical and mental. Layla is left with a healing wound on her head, a battery of pills she has to take daily, and lingering anxiety and panic attacks. She also has fairly severe memory loss, and Leeds has to remind her of conversations they've had and places that were once important to them as a couple. He struggles with the transition from boyfriend to quote-unquote caretaker, as he puts it. Quote, she, Layla, may think things are just fine between us, but that's only because she doesn't remember the details and how great it was before I essentially became her caretaker, unquote. The carefree girl he knows and loves is gone. He clearly resents Layla for having increased needs, despite the fact that Layla never asks for a caretaker. In fact, she is bothered when he infantilizes her. Leeds catches himself doing this. Quote, I have to stop treating her like she's incapable of caring for herself. She's capable. She's strong. She's incredible. And I'm going to be the one to remind her of that, because she seems to have forgotten, unquote. Leeds is obsessed with the ways in which Layla is different after the shooting. They have now been a couple for just 8 months, but Leeds is already falling out of love with Layla. He decides to take her back to the bed and breakfast where they first met to rekindle his feelings and basically try to get the old Layla back. Quote, I felt like it was on me to help her recover, since what happened to her never would have happened had I been more protective of her. I have to admit it was an adjustment. I had only met Layla 2 months before she spent a month in the hospital. Right after that, her mother temporarily moved into our already cramped new apartment. In less than 3 months, I went from always having lived alone as an adult to living with my girlfriend, her mother, and a couple of times her sister Aspen. Everything we had been through, not really feeling like we had our own space, and then watching Layla struggle to fall back into step with her life, I just craved normalcy. We both did. Unquote. Though Leeds is worried about their relationship, he's hopeful enough to bring an engagement ring with him. He also, secretly of course, contemplates buying the house with his hidden wealth as an ode to their relationship. Upon arrival at the house in Kansas, strange things almost immediately start to occur. Objects move on their own, and Layla has bouts of strange behavior, including blackouts. It appears that there's a ghost in the house. As I've established, Leeds has a pattern of keeping secrets, so he decides to keep his concerns about the paranormal presence in their vacation home a secret, and instead turns to an internet forum. He also puts a camera in the house, again without telling Layla she's being recorded, to try to capture the strange paranormal activity. He's half motivated by a desire to disprove the existence of ghosts altogether, and half motivated by curiosity. Whatever it is, he's not really afraid of it. His curiosity quickly devolves into obsession. His focus shifts from Layla to this ghost. Quote, Layla said that once, that she thinks there are different realms. It makes me want to tell her about this even more, but I'm worried it'll freak her out. She might want to leave. We'll have to pack our things and get in the car, and then I'll never get answers to all the thousands of questions that have formed in the last few minutes. Like, what is this thing? Who is this thing? Unquote. When the strange incidents first started, Leeds told himself that Layla shouldn't know out of concern for how it might affect her. Now he's admitting that he's keeping the truth from Layla just so that she will stay, and she won't have the urge to run away, which would be the natural human urge in the presence of a ghost. Leeds and the ghost start to talk, and he learns that she calls herself Willow. He discovers that the ghost has been temporarily possessing Layla for a few minutes at a time in order to eat, since they both arrived at the house in Kansas. In ghost form, Willow and Leeds communicate through a laptop and objects in the house, like a piano. However, when Willow possesses Layla, they can actually speak to each other. At first, Leeds is obviously angry at this violation. Quote, I'm not scared. If anything, I'm angry. Whatever this is, whoever this is, I don't like that they've used Layla like they have, unquote. He then immediately afterward decides that his anger on Layla's behalf doesn't outweigh his curiosity. Quote, but I'm also angry at myself because I need to see it again. I need to know that this isn't Layla going crazy. I need to know that this isn't me going crazy. I need answers to every single question I never knew I had. I want you to do it again, I type. I want to be able to have a real conversation with you, unquote. He grants Willow access to his girlfriend's body. Unsurprisingly, this becomes a pattern. Leeds decides to continue to make contact with Willow through Layla. He gives Willow permission he has no authority to grant to possess Layla. Layla at no point is a part of the conversation. Quote, "Knowing there's more to this life than meets the eye makes everything around me feel insignificant. My career feels insignificant. My love for Layla feels like it matters less to the timeline of my life than it did 2 days ago." Unquote. Leeds soon looks forward to his nights more than his days. At night, Leeds can talk to Willow through Layla. As he learns about her life as a ghost, he feels sad for her and wants to help her. Willow cannot leave the home and has no knowledge of who she was or why she's here. She's lonely most of the time, and she can only indulge in things like eating when she's possessing someone. Leeds is still contemplating buying the house, but now it would be for Willow. Just like with Layla, Leeds declares himself the martyr and makes excuses for his deception toward his girlfriend. Quote, "I wonder what happened in my childhood that makes me take on so much guilt, even when I'm not responsible for whatever is wrong. I take on the weight of Layla's sorrows. Now I'm taking on the weight of Willow's. Maybe I should buy this house. I know Layla wouldn't want to live here full time, but we could come here for vacations. That way, Willow wouldn't always be alone." Unquote. Quote, "I'm looking forward to spending the day with Layla, but I'm looking more forward to talking to Willow again tonight. There's definitely some deceit going on here. I'm fully aware of that, but it's hard to know where to draw the line when the lines aren't even in the same world." Unquote. He soon finds exactly where the line is, at least for Willow. One night, Layla wants to stay up to spend time with Leeds. You know, a normal thing that a girlfriend might want to do with her boyfriend. Leeds is annoyed because nighttime is his time with Willow. He knows he should feel bad, but he doesn't. Quote, "I should be satiated, but I'm full of impatience, even still. I want to go downstairs and talk to Willow. I think about that, how I brought Layla back to this place so I could focus on her, but that focus is beginning to blur. Layla has a right to know what's going on in the house around her. She's ignorant of Willow's presence, ignorant of Willow's use of her body at night, ignorant of my culpability in the situation, yet I do nothing to change any of that." Unquote. Leeds then decides to do the unthinkable. He decides that the appropriate response to his frustration is to drug his girlfriend by spiking her wine. Quote, "I open the lid to the Ambien, shake one into my hand, and then put the bottle back in the dresser. I go downstairs to make Layla a glass of wine. Wine mixed with margaritas will make her sleepier. The sleeping pill will exacerbate that. It's not like she doesn't take them on her own every night anyway. I'm just accelerating the process. I use the back of a spoon to crush the pill up on the counter. I scoop up the powder and mix it into the wine glass until it's completely dissolved. I turn to walk out of the kitchen, but I don't make it that far. The glass is knocked from my grip and shatters against the kitchen floor, several feet away from me." Unquote. Willow stops him from drugging Layla. Leeds does not really regret this action. He's just embarrassed that Willow saw him do it. Quote, "Willow saw what I was doing, and it obviously upset her. The severity of what I was about to do finally catches up to me. I look up at the ceiling and drag my hands down my face. What was I thinking? I leave the kitchen and head back upstairs, embarrassed that Willow saw that. Embarrassed I would even consider slipping Layla her own medication so that she'd fall asleep faster. My desire to speak to Willow fades immediately and is now replaced by a heaping pile of shame." Unquote. Shame and regret are not the same thing. Leeds falls out of love with Layla and in love with Willow in the span of a few days. Unfortunately, Layla has no idea any of this is happening and discovers the hidden engagement ring that Leeds brought with him. Willow warns him about this discovery. He is no longer interested in marriage with Layla, but Layla thinks he's going to propose to her any day now. Quote, "I thought for sure she was the one. I felt it in my bones. Now all I feel is remorse, because it wasn't until 10 seconds ago that I realized I've already moved on to another cycle. I've moved on to Willow. It's Willow I want to talk to when I wake up. Willow I want to see before I close my eyes. Willow I want to spend all my time with during the day. I prefer Willow over Layla now, in almost every way, and it's a heavy, appalling, shameful realization." Unquote. He even vents to Willow in Layla's body about his relationship with Layla. Quote, "Do you not enjoy being with her?" she asks. "I used to, but now it's complicated. I keep my voice low because for whatever reason, it feels like less of an admission if I say it quietly. A lot has changed between us since that night, since the shooting. We aren't the same couple we were in the beginning. She's been through a lot physically, emotionally, mentally, and of course I would never give up on her, but I don't know how to finish my sentence. I've never admitted any of this out loud. But well, Willow asks. I exhale. Sometimes I wonder if I would have met her today, how she is now, would I have fallen in love with her as easily as I fell in love with her in the beginning? I don't know. Part of me thinks I wouldn't be able to fall in love with this version of her at all. And when I have those thoughts, it makes me feel like shit. Because I'm the reason she is the way she is. I'm the reason she's so unhappy now. Because I failed to protect her." Unquote. Lee's priority becomes figuring out a way to make sure Willow isn't alone. He dreads having to leave this house. He decides, without consulting his girlfriend, to buy the house. In his email to the realtor, he says that he and Layla are also staying a few extra days. Ladies and gentlemen, do you think he told his girlfriend they're staying a few extra days? No, he did not. Quote, "I don't want to leave Willow alone, but I know Layla doesn't want to stay here. I would ask Willow to come with us, but that's not really an option. I can't allow her to continue using Layla's body. It was only supposed to be a temporary fix, a way for Willow and me to communicate, but it's taking its toll on Layla. It's taking a toll on me. The only solution I can think of is to buy this place. If I do that, Layla and I can visit. Willow could still take over Layla's body the few times a year we come here, and in the meantime, we could work on finding answers for Willow. When she's ready for that, of course." Unquote. Quote, "I don't know how Layla will feel about staying even longer, but Layla's concern doesn't seem to weigh on my decision. I've made it, and I'm prepared to deal with the fallout." Unquote. When Layla finds out about the house, she is of course upset that Leeds went behind her back and made this decision without her. Layla starts to pack her bags, and to stop her from leaving, he proposes to her, all the while thinking about how every word he's saying to her is a lie. He doesn't love her, and he doesn't want to marry her. Layla apologizes to Leeds for ruining the proposal. The fact that Leeds allows her to apologize is awful, given what he's been up to. Quote, "I've done some pretty terrible things in the last year, but this may be the lowest I've ever sunk. I just proposed to a girl I'm not even sure I'm in love with anymore." Unquote. Willow, the ghost, is upset about the proposal. She feels jealousy toward Layla. Leeds ensures Willow that she is the girl he really wants, not Layla. Quote, "She's prettier when you're inside of her, I say." Unquote. Quote, "It has to be hard for Willow when I'm intimate with Layla. But I have to be physical with Layla to keep her here, or I won't get to see Willow. It's the worst catch-22 imaginable. I can't break up with the girl I'm falling out of love with, or I won't get to spend time with the girl I'm falling in love with." Unquote. After successfully manipulating and conning Layla into staying, Leeds suddenly truly wonders for the first time if he's made a mistake. A man from the paranormal internet forum reaches out, claiming he can help Willow find answers about who she is and why she's here. Willow is hesitant, afraid that if she finds answers, she'll cease to exist completely. Leeds realizes, however, that Willow seems to know information about their lives that she shouldn't. He fears that he has unknowingly fallen in love with the ghost of Sable and regrets letting his relationship unravel. When Leeds confronts Willow about it, she is saddened by his suspicion of her, but has no explanation for the private information that she knows. Suddenly fearful, Leeds tells Layla abruptly that they have to leave the house. Devastated by his about face, Willow tells Leeds to contact the paranormal investigator from the forum back. Without Leeds, Willow doesn't mind if she disappears forever anymore. Despite thinking she is Sable, he is saddened by this, and he feels compelled to help her move on at Layla's expense. Quote, "I feel the pull to help Willow in my gut, my bones, my heart. If I walk away, those feelings will stay here, in this house, with this ghost, and I'll leave feeling just as empty as I felt when I arrived." Unquote. So, at this point, you're probably thinking, how could this get worse? Let's recap. In just a few days, Leeds has fallen out of love with his traumatized girlfriend, fallen in love with a ghost girl named Willow, lied to his girlfriend countless times, violating Layla's bodily autonomy in order to flirt with, again, a ghost. He drugged his girlfriend to spend more time with his ghost girlfriend, and then he bought the house they're staying in, unbeknownst to Layla, to continue to have an affair with said ghost. Well, somehow it gets infinitely worse. Buckle up. Quote, Willow covers her mouth with her hand, trying to stifle her cry. Then she drops her hand to her chest, over her heart. You're going to help me? I let go of a regretful sigh. Yes, and I have no idea why. So please don't make me regret this. Please. Willow shakes her head adamantly. I won't. But Layla isn't going to stay here willingly. Not after tonight. I walk back toward the house and away from the car. I know. This is the moment I truly question myself as a boyfriend, a caretaker, a human being. I don't know why I feel so strongly about staying. Or why I feel so strongly about keeping Layla here with me. My behavior right now goes against every moral that I have, but I've never felt this kind of certainty in my gut. My gut is telling me this terrible decision will pay off when it's all said and done, which means this is the moment I'll likely regret the most. Unquote. I guess when Leeds almost committed a crime by drugging Layla, he got a taste for it. He decides to imprison his girlfriend in the upstairs bedroom. Leeds has his girlfriend of 8 months tied to a bedpost. Yup, that really happens. After making sure his girlfriend is adequately bound and gagged, he welcomes the mysterious man from the forum, promising answers. Quote, I placed 2 layers of duct tape over Layla's mouth before I came downstairs, but I can still hear her muffled screams as the detective takes a seat at the table. Unquote. Quote, how can I have hope for a way out of this when things have gotten so out of control? I'm speaking to a detective I met online while my girlfriend is upstairs, losing her damn mind. As if she knows I'm thinking about her, the noise picks up again. The wooden headboard pounds against the wall upstairs, creating an eerie echo in this huge empty house. Unquote. Quote, I rest my elbows on the table and slide my palms over my ears to drown out the sounds Layla is making upstairs. I can't take hearing her upset like this. I love her so much, but I don't know that I can go back and talk about why I love her so much when I'm putting her through this. Unquote. The man gives Leeds multiple fake names, but Leeds lets him in the front door anyway. Leeds is determined to help Willow find her purpose and closure at any and all costs, even as he suspects that Willow is Sable. He is fully aware of the legal implications of what he's doing. Even as Layla screams her head off in terror, rubs her wrists raw, and begs to be let go, he prioritizes his fear of repercussions for himself over her well-being. Quote, Layla is still tied to the bed, but the lamp on the nightstand has been knocked over. She's looking at me calmly. Let me go or I'll break something else. I shake my head. I can't. She lifts her leg and kicks at the nightstand. It scoots a foot across the floor, and then she kicks it again, knocking it over. Help, she screams. Help me. She knows someone is downstairs, and even though she knows someone is in the house, she has no idea he isn't here to help her escape. He's not here to help you, Layla, I say. He's here to help us get answers. I don't want answers. I want to leave. I've seen her upset since all of this started, but I'm not sure she's been this upset. Part of me just wants to cut her loose and let her go, but if I do that, it will only mean trouble for me. She'd go straight to the police, and what would my excuse be? A ghost made me do it? If they don't arrest me, they'll send me to a psychiatric hospital. Unquote. When Layla makes attempts to leave, Willow possesses her and walks her back upstairs to be tied up again. The investigator interviews Leeds for what is likely several hours to probe for information that could lead to an explanation for Willow. Then, the novel presents a twist. A twist that desperately tries to justify Leeds' actions and absolve him of any guilt. This twist is ridiculous and changes nothing about my interpretation of this book. It turns out that Willow is not Sable. Willow is Layla. And actually, Layla is Sable. Yes, I know that's confusing and makes no sense. Leeds is also skeptical. The explanation the investigator provides is that when Sable shot Layla and Leeds subsequently shot Sable, both Layla and Sable actually died at the same time. When this happened, their souls swapped bodies. Therefore, the Layla that recovered in the hospital was actually Sable the whole time. This means that the real Layla died in the shooting, and for some reason, her ghost decided to manifest itself in Kansas, where they met, instead of Tennessee, where they actually live. Neither woman was ever fully aware of her true identity. They both dealt with odd, jumbled memories and confusing thoughts. So even though the woman who looks like Layla is Sable, she doesn't fully recall being Sable. When Leeds tells the captive woman that she is Sable, she refuses to accept it and is terrified by what Leeds is saying. Quote, "I don't blame her for being scared of me. If someone had tried to explain this to me a month ago, I wouldn't have been able to believe it. I attempt to come off as level-headed as I can because I know she thinks the opposite of me right now. I can't expect you to accept this any easier than I did, but it's true. It's just going to take time and maybe proof before you fully comprehend what's happening. For that, I'm sorry, but I can't let you leave now. Not until I figure out how to fix this for Layla." Unquote. Leeds' feelings sure do flip-flop a lot. Leeds feels unburdened by this discovery. It only affirms for him that he loves Layla so deeply he was willing to go to these lengths to get back to her. Quote, "I've had this constant hollow feeling inside me since that night, and for so long I felt guilty for feeling that way, for feeling like I lost her when she was still right in front of me. I even felt guilty for the way Willow reminded me of her. That guilt is gone now. I feel justified. Every choice I made, every feeling Willow filled me with, it was all justified because my soul was already in love with hers. It's why I felt an inexplicable pull to this place, to Willow. Even when I thought Willow was Sable, I still felt that pull, and it confused me. It all makes sense now. I press my lips to hers and I kiss her. I kiss Layla. As soon as she kisses me back, I feel everything I used to feel when I would kiss her. Everything I thought I'd lost. It's right here. It's been here all along." Unquote. Layla needs a body, and Sable was supposed to already be dead. Now feeling emboldened, Leeds decides that he must kill Sable in order to save Layla. They make a plan, but it's a risk. Leeds will kill Sable in Layla's body, Willow's soul will enter the body, and then Leeds will revive her. She has to be revived within 5 minutes, or Layla as he knows it will be lost forever, trapped as a disembodied voice in this house. Leeds takes Sable into the pool and drowns her. Layla is successfully revived, and her soul and body are joined once more. Leeds and Layla decide to start fresh, never visiting the bed and breakfast that he owns again, and never visiting their Tennessee home again. They live happily ever after in Montana, feeling grateful for the second chance they've been given. An Offer from a Gentleman and Layla are two very different novels on the surface. One is historical fiction, and the other is modern fantasy. They are set in completely different time periods in completely different countries. But they are both romance novels, and they both promote toxic ideas about heterosexual love and gender dynamics between men and women. There are notable and interesting differences. For example, in the Bridgerton novel, the setting is far in the past, when gender roles were far more rigid, so Benedict doesn't feel conflicted in the same way that Leeds does about his actions in the Layla novel. Though our main male characters, Benedict and Leeds, are two very different men, they both seek to control the women in their lives. Let's refer back to my definition for the homebound romance trope. Through physical force, or other means, the male main character forces a woman who he is, has been, or will be romantically involved with to go to or remain in a home that he has ownership over for an extended period of time. Within this trope, 4 common themes emerged as I read both novels. Misogyny, a belief that the ends justify the means, violations of female autonomy, and wealth as power. These themes are not fully distinct, and they overlap and interact with each other a lot in the books. I want to start by talking about theme 1, misogyny. Both novels normalize benevolent sexism and prioritize the male perspective, which are both key facets of misogyny. First, I want to touch on benevolent sexism. Benevolent sexism refers to attitudes about women that seem positive in tone, for example, women should be cherished, but nonetheless connote inferiority to men based on fragility, lack of competence, or need of help and protection. Misogyny is disguised in both books as benevolent sexism, and this type of sexism is inextricably connected to the homebound trope. The male main character must keep the woman physically contained in his home because he says it's for her own good, and whatever he says goes. In the Bridgerton novel, Benedict literally says that he has to save Sophie from herself by abducting her and forcing her to work in his mother's home. He thinks her decision to be a bloody little housemaid is stupid. He calls her a fool. He doesn't believe she can possibly know what's best for her. In Layla, after Leeds ties Layla up, he patronizes her as she attempts to break free. He talks down to her in his head and out loud, though he would certainly characterize himself as sympathetic toward her. Essentially, he's thinking, why is she making this even harder than it has to be? She just needs to stay calm, even though she has no idea what's going on. In reality, seeing Layla's obvious distress makes him feel uncomfortable and bad for what he's doing, and he should feel bad. He resents Layla for making him feel bad, and refusing to make him feel better about victimizing her. He subtly blames Layla for her reaction to his abuse. I've been talking for half an hour straight, and the man hasn't spoken a word. I would continue, but Layla hasn't let up this whole time. I need to make sure she's okay, or at least as okay as she can be while being held against her will by her own boyfriend. I'm sorry, I say to him, scooting my chair back. I'll be back in a few minutes. He hits the stop button with an understanding nod. I walk up the stairs again to plead with Layla to trust me long enough to find answers. When I open the door, she's on her knees on the bed, doing her best to slip her hands out of the rope that's connecting her wrists to the bedpost. Layla, I say, defeated, can you please stop? She yanks her arms in the opposite direction of the bedpost in an attempt to break the rope. I wince. That had to hurt. I walk over to the bed and check her wrists. They're raw from all the time she's tried to break free. Her wrists are starting to bleed. She mutters something unintelligible, so I remove the duct tape from her mouth. She sucks in a huge gulp of air. Please untie me, she pleads. Her eyes are bloodshot and sad. Mascara is smeared down her left cheek. It kills me seeing her like this. I don't want this for her, but I have no other choice. At least it feels like I have no other choice. I can't, you know that. Please, she says. It hurts. It won't hurt if you stop trying to free yourself. I adjust the pillow beneath her and give the rope more slack so she can lie down. I know she feels like a prisoner. I guess in a way she is. But I've at least left her legs untied. If she'd just lie still and stop trying to fight me on this, she'd come out of it just fine. She might even get some much needed rest. Just give me a couple of hours. When I'm finished talking to him, I'll bring you downstairs with me. She rolls her tear-rimmed eyes. You're a liar. All you do now is lie to me. I don't let those words penetrate the walls of my chest. I know she doesn't mean them. She's just scared, upset. But so am I. I lean forward and press a kiss against the top of her head. She tries to pull away from me, but she can't go far. She's crying now, trying not to look at me. I hide my guilt behind a hardened jaw. If you promise not to scream, I won't put the duct tape back on. This is a compromise she's willing to make. She nods with a defeated look in her eyes, as if I won this round, but I'm not trying to win anything other than our normalcy back. When I close the door and lock her inside, I can hear her begin to sob. I feel her pain in every part of me, cracking inside my bones. I press my forehead against the door for a few seconds and force myself to regain my composure before heading back downstairs. Leeds says that he feels like he has no other choice. Despite knowing that his actions are unjustifiable, he presses on, acting out in increasingly erratic ways. His gut is telling him to do this, he says, so everyone has to be at the mercy of his gut. He believes he is acting in service of the greater good, even though he can't adequately explain what the greater good is beyond getting answers. His feelings somehow matter more than Layla's. Subconsciously, he believes that his feelings, wants, and needs matter more than hers, because he's a man. He believes that he matters more than her. Whether he thinks that consciously or not about himself, his actions speak louder than words. He proves that throughout the novel by constantly prioritizing himself over his girlfriend. Leeds prioritizes himself every time he lies right to Layla's face or lies by omission, which happens continuously in the novel. I take Layla's face in my hands. My grip is firm, but she won't be still, and I need her to look me in the eyes. Layla, listen to me. Tears are streaming down her cheeks. She's breathing heavily, inhaling shaky gasps. The white of her eyes have turned red from all the crying. Layla, you know this is out of my control. You know that. I wipe the tears from her cheeks, but more follow. Even if I were to untie you, you'd be unable to leave. If I can't leave, then why do I have to stay tied up? Her voice is tearful, a guttural ache. Untie me and let me go downstairs with you. You can tie me to the chair. I don't care. I just don't want to be alone up here anymore. I want to, but I can't. I don't want her to hear everything I'm about to admit to the man downstairs. I know she's scared, but she's safe in here, even if she doesn't feel like it. Okay, I'll bring you downstairs with me. Her eyes grow hopeful, but that hope fades when I say, soon. I need 20 more minutes, and then I'll come back up here. I press a kiss against her forehead. 20 minutes, I promise. I put the nightstand back near the bed. I place the broken lamp on top of it, and then I go back to the kitchen. My feet feel heavier as I descend the stairs. The longer I keep Layla tied up against her will, the guiltier I feel, and the harder it's going to be for her to forgive me. Leeds believes he knows best. He genuinely believes, somehow, that tying up his girlfriend is in the best interest of their relationship and their future. Evil. In both novels, we get to hear directly from the abusers why they think their abuse is justified. The Bridgerton novel's point of view is third-person omniscient, and the Layla novel's point of view is first-person told from Leeds' perspective. An Offer from a Gentleman is, of course, one of a set of books about the Bridgerton family. The novel is literally Benedict's story. It says so right on the cover of the book. So even though in this novel we get to hear the inner thoughts and motives of both Sophie and Benedict, this is truly Benedict's story, and that's clear from the ways in which the narrative makes excuses for Benedict through Sophie. The author seemed to believe that Benedict's actions must be justified because he is the main character of the novel, the true main character of the novel. In Layla, we only get to hear from Leeds. Layla's unfiltered perspective isn't present in the novel. We only know who she is through him. He views her through a biased, idealized lens. His perception of her is narrow. She's a manic pixie dream girl, and she lacks depth. Her personality to him is just confident, essentially. The second she is not confident and carefree after the shooting, he panics and begins to lose love for her. Trauma, particularly head injuries, can cause personality changes. This is very well known. Long before we learn the novel's twist, the message the reader receives is that we should pity Leeds for bearing the burden of Layla's injury, and then we should root for him as he falls in love with Willow. Though the book is called Layla, she is its object and not its subject. Leeds projects onto her. She's put on a pedestal. Even her supposed flaws, like being a terrible dancer, are framed as the reasons why she's appealing. She's perfectly imperfect at first, until the imperfections become too glaring for Leeds' liking. Both kidnappings in the novel occur because the male main character is trying to force the female main character to be someone they are not. At the start of the Layla novel, Leeds is trying to force Layla to be the girlfriend she was before the shooting, and then he forces Layla to be his unwilling partner in helping Willow get answers, supposedly in service of their relationship somehow. Benedict is trying to force Sophie to be his mistress, though he won't admit that's what he's doing. Male perception and desires are more important than women's lived reality and desires. Theme number 2 is the ends justify the means philosophy. In both novels, soulmates are real. By soulmates, I'm referring to the idea that there is a perfect person for you with whom you are compatible in every way, and you just have to find them. In the Bridgerton novel, Sophie is revealed to be the Lady in Silver, so Benedict falls for her twice. After meeting Sophie at the masquerade ball, Benedict decides instantly that she is the one, despite not knowing her name or anything else about her. However, after years of looking for her with no success, he gives up on the chance of ever finding her. He initially feels guilty about his attraction to Sophie because he feels like he is betraying the Lady in Silver. However, he decides to pursue the person in front of him, not the woman from his past. He feels so drawn to both the Lady in Silver and Sophie, who are one and the same, it turns out. Benedict falling in love with both a dolled-up version of Sophie and the everyday version of Sophie is supposed to be proof of their deep compatibility and proof that they're meant to be. But the universe doesn't magically bring them together. Benedict forces them together. They are not meant to be. Benedict makes it so. Sophie does love Benedict for some reason, and she ends the novel feeling like she achieved her happily ever after once they get married and start a family. But Sophie's love doesn't change the fact that she rejected him, despite her feelings. Her values and convictions about the type of relationship and family she wants to have trumped her feelings. Benedict could stand to learn something from her. In Layla, the twist is that Leeds has actually been imprisoning Sable, not Layla, and Willow is actually the spirit of Layla. Because he's been abusing Sable in Layla's body, his actions are meant to suddenly feel justified. But as I stated earlier, Leeds thinks he's traumatizing the real Layla for the vast majority of the novel. Because Sable has been established as a stalker and a murderer, the ends are supposed to justify the means. However, Layla doesn't remember being Sable, not fully. So in reality, Leeds is torturing a confused and scared young woman who cowers away from him in real fear. He ultimately murders this woman in the pool. So she was right to be afraid. Both Sophie and Layla end up being in different forms than their love interests expect at some point in their stories. Sophie is a maid instead of an upper-class woman, as Benedict assumes, and Layla is a disembodied voice. Both stories endorse the idea of soulmates who are always inexplicably drawn to each other, despite circumstances and appearances and even across realms in the case of Layla. Benedict and Leeds' initial lack of information is supposed to serve as an excuse for their actions. The narrative tells us that if Benedict had only known Sophie was the Lady in Silver earlier, none of this would have ever happened, and he wouldn't have had to do what he did. That's why Benedict places the blame primarily on Sophie, for keeping her identity a secret, instead of on himself, where it belongs, for being a kidnapper. Of course, Benedict is a grown adult, and is fully responsible for his actions, and there is no good justification for what he did to Sophie. Likewise, the narrative tells us that if Leeds had only known Willow was Layla, none of this would have happened, and he wouldn't have had to do what he did to Layla. But of course, like Benedict, Leeds is a grown adult and is fully responsible for his actions, and there's no good justification for what he did. Rather than the male characters having to truly grapple with their actions, the female love interests ultimately excuse them for their actions in one way or another. The focus of the story becomes on her duplicitousness, whether conscious or not, rather than his literal crimes. Benedict refuses to admit to abducting Sophie, instead only admitting to blackmailing her. Even that admission from him is nonchalant and done in jest. Benedict doesn't feel particularly bad about any of it. Leeds more freely admits to his actions. He knows that he's manipulated Layla, and even still, quote, Layla's anger and my guilt combined still lack the capability to breach my conscience, unquote. Theme number 3 is female autonomy as optional. In the Bridgerton novel, Benedict violates Sophie's autonomy by forcing her to either move into his mother's home or go to prison in Australia. She's physically trapped either way, and must choose between the lesser of two evils. Either way, she has to sacrifice her dignity. In Layla, when Leeds and Layla arrive at the bed and breakfast in Kansas and strange events start to occur, he secretly installs security cameras to spy on Layla without her consent, violating her autonomy. Quote, Layla doesn't know about the security cameras. I'm not trying to hide anything from her, but I did set them up while she was asleep. I just figured if she saw one and mentioned it, I'd tell her they were here when we showed up, so she wouldn't grow concerned. But watching the videos recorded by the app is an invasion of her privacy. I just don't want to tell her I have access to the footage because I don't want her to worry unnecessarily. I also don't want her to feel like I'm spying on her. But in a way, I am. I set up the cameras as a way to catch her in the act. Because who else am I going to catch? A ghost that I don't believe in? An intruder that can somehow bypass deadbolts? Unquote. Leeds uses these security cameras to watch back his secret late-night conversations with Willow once they start. He is giddy about it. Quote, I lived a life with very little that excited me. After I first met Layla, I was eager to wake up. My eyes would open and immediately search her out. If the alarm was set, I'd silence it at the first sound, fearful it would wake her because I wanted to be the thing that woke her. I'd kiss her cheek or drag my fingers up her arm until she smiled. I wanted to see her before she saw me, but I also wanted to be what she woke up to. Today, I wake up in a similar yet entirely new way, my skin already buzzing with anticipation before I'm fully alert. My eyes pop open and I immediately search out Layla, but not because I want to be the thing that wakes her. I want the opposite. I want to slip out of our bed undetected so I can hide in the bathroom and rewatch footage from last night, unquote. He gleefully watches the violation again, and it excites him to know that ghosts are real, and his excitement is more important than Layla's bodily autonomy. So he immediately decides he wants to talk to Willow again, through Layla, of course. Quote, It's been a while since I've woken up with this much enthusiasm for the day. I'm ready to speak to Willow again, unquote. And of course, Leeds continues to violate Layla's bodily autonomy every night when he gives Willow access to possess her body without her consent. While in Layla's body, Willow eats a lot of food. Leeds frames this as a good thing because Layla has been exhibiting signs of an eating disorder. Even though Layla is undereating and that's not healthy, it doesn't give Leeds a right to control what and how much she eats. She's an adult. While in Layla's body, Willow also shares a kiss with Leeds. Layla obviously isn't consenting to any of this, despite her body being used for the act. His feelings for Willow and desire to give her closure trumps Layla's bodily autonomy over and over again. His entitlement to her body is disgusting. Leeds gets angry when the paranormal investigator calls him out on this. Quote, Why won't either of you let Layla leave? I don't answer that, because the answer makes me feel like a monster. The man leans forward, tilting his head. Are you in love with her? Of course. She's only tied up because I want to keep an eye on her, but I can't do that if she leaves. I wasn't talking about Layla. My eyes fall to the table when I realize what he's insinuating. I can feel the heat in my chest spread to my neck, my cheeks. No, it's not like that. Not like what? It's not... I don't know. I care about Willow, but I'm in love with Layla. But you developed a relationship with Willow, enough of one that you would put Layla at risk in order to help Willow. I don't feel like Layla is at risk, I say. You certainly aren't keeping her out of harm's way by forcing her to stay here. But I'm also not doing it out of a lack of concern for her. I'm getting agitated at his line of questioning. Look, it doesn't matter why I'm choosing to keep Layla here. She's seen too much. That's a good enough reason alone. I wave my hand toward him. Ask me something else. He rolls his eyes a little. All right, How often do you and Willow use Layla's body without her knowledge? Not as much as we did at first. How often did it happen in the beginning? A lot." Unquote. Lastly, the fourth theme is wealth as power. In both novels, the men in the relationship have more wealth than the women, and they use this wealth to manipulate the women in their lives. In the Bridgerton novel, Benedict wields his power in society as a wealthy, respectable man to entrap Sophie against her will. Sophie is a virtually penniless maid, and Benedict's older brother Anthony is a viscount. They are not the same, and they do not have the same power in society. The differences in their socioeconomic status put Sophie at Benedict's mercy. Benedict knows this and delights in this, no matter what attempts the book makes to convince us otherwise. He's smug, arrogant, and/or angry in every interaction that he has with Sophie because he knows he can be, and Sophie never deserves any of it. But she also constantly excuses his behavior. He wields his socioeconomic power like a bludgeon, crushing Sophie's freedom so that he can keep an eye on her. Though Sophie moves into Violet's home, Benedict explicitly states that he has free access to Violet's home at any and all times. He takes advantage of that access to stalk and harass Sophie at her place of work. Benedict's ultimate goal in bringing Sophie to Violet's home is to force her to be his mistress. He claims that it's to care for Sophie's safety, but I don't buy it. While Sophie is employed by Violet, he seduces her and they end up sleeping together at his house nearby. His plan to wear her down in an environment that he controls works perfectly. He forces emotional intimacy she repeatedly states she doesn't want by prying for information she's not ready to give. He constantly blows past her boundaries. Whatever she thinks and wants is stupid to him, simply because it doesn't make sense to him. He blames her for his wounded pride over and over again. He disrespects Sophie's thoughts and desires for herself and her life. He fails to empathize with her and recognize his privileged perspective. He's manipulative and mean. At the end of it all, he demands an apology from her for not telling him right away that she was the lady in silver, and he even thinks she should be more sorry than he is for abducting her. She is constantly paying the price for his lack of self-control and emotional regulation. Constantly. Everything for Benedict is a power play. He admits that he intentionally likes annoying her, but the annoyances always seem to involve him humiliating or humbling her in some way. The joke feels one-sided, and Sophie isn't laughing. Benedict consistently reveals a tendency to be entitled, selfish, cruel, and controlling. In Layla, Leeds is also wealthy by virtue of his family's money. While Sophie is at least aware of Benedict's money and status, Leeds leaves Layla in the dark. He then proceeds to buy the large home that they're staying in without consulting her. He's able to change their plans and keep them in the house by weaponizing his bank account. He buys the house so he can carry on his affair with Willow while telling Layla that the house is for them. His money becomes a tool of manipulation. Aside from being badly written, these books are deeply problematic, adding insult to injury. Most concerning is that the readership for these books often consists of young women. Given the rise in BookTok and its focus on romance novels specifically, the algorithm is promoting these books to impressionable girls and young women, who are the primary users of TikTok in general and the primary users of the BookTok hashtag. According to the Pew Research Center, a majority of American teens use TikTok, and 22% of teen girls say they use TikTok almost constantly, compared to 12% of teen boys. Julia Quinn's entire Bridgerton series has been called out for racism, marital assault, and more. In an opinion piece on another Colleen Hoover novel, It Ends With Us, now a major motion picture, the writer argues that Colleen Hoover has a pattern of glamorizing abuse, and I certainly agree. Despite many people pointing out her tendency to create toxic love stories, as I said at the beginning of the video, she has 2 more movie adaptations on the way. her popularity shows no signs of stopping. So what effect might these books and romance novels like them have on young women? Quote, taking a look into the demographics of her readers, the vast majority of them are impressionable young women between the ages of 14 and 23. Many of her books are marketed as romances instead of literary fiction, and some are even labeled as young adult novels. I would understand this type of content for older women with developed brains and life experiences. But for this audience, her content allows easily influenced young women to believe this is commonplace and even romantic. Unquote. Romance novels that use these kinds of tropes groom young women for abusive relationships. According to the National Center on Safe Supportive Learning Environments, girls and young women ages 16 to 24 are at the highest risk, and each year, 1 in 10 American teenagers suffers physical violence at the hands of a boyfriend or girlfriend, and many others are sexually or emotionally abused. Dating violence can inflict long-lasting pain, putting survivors at increased risk of substance abuse, depression, poor academic performance, and experiencing further violence from a partner. So, where do we go from here? Well, these types of books are popular because we make them popular. All of us. By buying them and by promoting them on sites like TikTok. Even if we hate read something, we may be lining the author's pockets if we're not careful about how we're reading. Use the library to get books for free if you're curious. Use the power of your dollar elsewhere. Use the power of your attention on social media by redirecting it away from toxic love stories and toward healthier examples, and books that just have better writing, frankly. Talk to the young people, particularly the young girls and women in your life, about what they're reading. Thank you so much for being here. In my videos, I explore what might happen in the future based on our past and present. I also explore how we can all be a part of making the future we want to happen. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Until next time.